Hey, welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio. I am your host, and this week, my guest is Chris Sicard. We're going to talk about the Seattle independent music scene, but in this first segment of our epic two-part interview, we're going to discuss his current solo project called Critter. Now, longtime listeners of the podcast might know Chris as the lead singer of Waking Things. He's been on the show a couple of times to talk about that band, but Chris Sicard has been a fixture in Seattle's indie scene for nearly 15 years. I've known him for roughly a third of that. During that time, he has jumped from project to project, building up a catalog of evocative music that's often difficult to pin down by genre. But now, with his 2021 full-length album Critter, he's written some of the most compelling music of his career. Chris's style is defined by open-hearted lyricism, adventurous productions, and a willingness to take risks on every track. He delves deeply into topics of identity, self-reflection, and melancholy, utilizing his signature mix of humor and warmth to leave a lasting impression. As a result, he has been consistently well received within the Seattle community and beyond. Critter takes elements of alt-rock, electronica, and jangle pop and spins them into something wholly new. Critter revolves between upbeat and energetic, and other times moody and mysterious. It is a masterclass in modern indie. Featuring prominent artists such as Danny Denial, Tiger Rider, High Crime, and more, Critter will be welcomed by Chris's longtime listeners, while also introducing him to the broader audience his work deserves. Chris Sicard, thanks for joining me here on Mike Seibert Radio, talking about stuff and things and musics, and I'm just so excited. I'm like almost nervous almost.
Well, thank you for having me.
Every podcast is somebody's first podcast, and we have a history that kind of goes back to the KGRG era of Mike Seibert Radio, back when I was doing the college radio thing. And I've told this story a number of times. I've told you this story a number of times, but still, even then, some 6 years later, one of my favorite memories of being on KGRG is when you and your band Waking Things came up for the old Buzz Morning Show and did a live performance and did some trivia. Still the trivia master I see over there.
I will relent that title if somebody can actually beat me. But to be fair, they have to beat me at the Green River Community College. They can't beat me anywhere else, because truth be told is that I'm probably really a terrible trivia person, but it's just the right circumstances.
Yeah.
You know?
But yeah, I mean, so we've kept in touch since. You know, I've been a big fan and supporter of yours and of Waking Things and all of the cool stuff that you've done over the years. And what I've seen, what I've observed as both a fan and a friend, is that your music has evolved in a number of different ways. It's taken on different forms, and we're going to talk about a couple different things today. Mostly we're going to talk about your new solo project, Critter, which will be available in its entirety on August 3rd, but a better portion of those songs are available now, and we'll talk about those as we go. But we're also going to kind of talk about the independent Seattle music scene. And that was actually kind of like the inspiration for this particular podcast. It's like you had posted on Facebook saying like, well, hey, what started off as like a 5-page paper is kind of ballooned to like a 19-page opus. I think I kind of want to talk about it. I was like, if only you knew somebody that had a platform for that.
Turns out I know someone.
Know a guy that knows a guy.
Yeah. I just want to take a second, though, and step back and say,
of course,
how special that is that you've come from KGRG and college radio, and you're here now. Mm-hmm. And you're here at the Como News Studio, and you're not just running your own podcast, but you're working in the business, and I think that's really special. So I appreciate that you're sticking with me along the way, so thank you.
You're very welcome, man, and thank you. That's very flattering. And you know, we kind of took a tour through the studios earlier, and one of the things I had shared with you as we were catching up and discussing is that it's easy to take some of this stuff for granted. We've got a fantastic view of the Space Needle, and it's a gorgeous evening here in downtown. But what I have learned over, definitely over this last year, but even going even further back, is just learning gratitude and being thankful for my opportunities. And I sometimes kind of forget to reflect and say, oh yeah, I've been doing this a while. I've made some really cool connections, but I still kind of try to stay tethered in a lot of ways to a lot of those things, including keeping in touch with you and supporting some of my other homies that I've got acquainted with way back on the college radio days as the podcast kind of continues. But I will confess to you, Chris, it is a weird balance sometimes. Wait a sec. So you do an independent podcast, but you work at a radio station? It's like, yes, it's occasionally complicated. There's bleed over, but there's still kind of like a separation of church and state, if that makes sense.
Sure, but I mean, I think that's really great that you can use the facilities of a professional news studio to your to your desires. I mean, if I had access to a nice podcasting studio like this, I'm sure you'd find me doing some sort of like murder mystery podcast with my wife. It'd probably be something like, you remember that in the 1970s, that cold case? Well, guess what? We solved it. We're coming for you.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of, let's get a little personal here before we dig into the meat of things. You and the wife are expecting. You're going to be a dad. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, this is quite literally the most important thing that I've ever done in my entire life. Everybody has their own take on children and parenthood and whether it's important or not. Mm-hmm. And I will be the first to say that I was one of those very reluctant people as I was in my younger years. And I think that's probably natural to be a younger person and say, I'm not old. I just want to put that out there. I'm only 33. But when I found out that we were having a baby, my whole entire perspective shifted. And I think that it was probably because I'm with the right person. Mm-hmm. And when we found out that we were having a baby, I had a whole full breakdown moment. And since that day, all I've wanted, there's been no hesitation. It's just been, I just want to meet her. I just want to, I want her to be here. I know she's going to be like a little blob and a little, she's like one of those, those old toys, those little glowworms.
Oh, glowworms. Yeah.
Sorry if anybody listening doesn't remember these, but they're the little glow, maybe something else like, can we make a reference to something newer?
I don't know. Is there newer stuff? I don't even know. Because I was going to say most of my audience comes in to hear me talk about Transformers. So I think we're kind of in that 80s nostalgia toy stuff. I think a glowworm is pretty much a good reference.
I'm gonna go off the cuff here, and I'm gonna say a random. How about just a licensed toy? Like a stuffed Harry Potter toy. Everybody knows who Harry Potter is, right? So imagine it's a tiny little beanbag Harry Potter toy that you get from Universal Studios that cost way too much money, and it's maybe it's got like some beans that's just like one of those round ones, like a generic toy that doesn't actually have a shape. That's what this baby is going to be, just a generic toy from Universal Studios that's shaped like a beanbag, but it's going to be my beanbag. And no, for real though, it's really terrible.
That's a very bizarre analogy.
Listen,
it's oddly specific.
Yeah, no, I know she's a baby, and I know that it's going to be months and months before she starts really developing that personal personality, but I'm still excited. I'm just super excited to meet her.
That's fantastic. And you and your wife are still relatively newlyweds, right?
Well, yeah, you know how it goes.
We do.
We met, and she fell hopelessly head over heels for me. It's hard not to. I know.
It's hard not to.
And once she did, I said, you know what? You're right. This is right. This is right. And I couldn't disagree with her. The truth is that I think that we both just fell in love with each other, and then we got married in October during the pandemic, but we had a super, super small backyard wedding where we kept everything distance, and we had, I think it was like maybe 9 or 10 people total. It was very safe, very good, but we had a great time, and it was shortly after that we've just been kind of steam trained the whole time.
Yeah.
No reluctance.
That's interesting. And what that tells me, though, is that you, like a lot of folks, have just been living. You know what I mean? Living your lives during this time of the pandemic. And, I've talked on this podcast and other places about, it's like, oh, we don't get to go to conventions, or it's like, we miss like this human touch and all of those aspects. But meanwhile, within our own selves and our own families, we're going on living our own lives. Like you had asked me earlier, how my life has been. And because of the nature of my work, I really haven't been as directly impacted by the ramifications of the pandemic as a lot of other folks. Again, I have a lot to be grateful and thankful for, but it's interesting how folks will continue to live and how life goes on.
Well, I said it before that not everybody is as fortunate, and that's understandable because this last year and a half has taken so much from so many people. At the very most, it's people taking lives from people, taking loved ones away from people, and at the very least taking identities away, taking whole entire who you were prior to the outbreak, prior to the lockdown, prior to all of the quarantining and everything. What kind of person were you? What were you doing? And who are you now? How were you able to leave that behind? And just as it is with everything in life, they say that it's the reason in a season, in a lifetime. People are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing with your own self. You have these chapters, and this is getting really esoteric and also really cliche. But I do have to say that it's important that we look at how we've grown and look at that growth and accept it and just allow ourselves to keep moving.
I think so. And for me, at least, I talk about gratitude, but I'm also glossing over a fair amount of existential dread, right, of which I have shared a lot with my audience as well. And you're right, though, is like as we get towards the end of this, if this is indeed towards the end of it, and it seems it's going that way, but you just never know. But yeah, it's at a time where we kind of reconsider who we are. And like you said, taking into account who we were and really trying to reconcile and become the best versions of ourselves. And I don't think there's a single one of us that, regardless of how directly we were affected by the ramifications of the pandemic, either directly or indirectly, we're all going to be forever changed in some way. There's some kind of imprintation. I don't think that's a word, but some kind of lasting imprint that we're all going to carry with us.
And that's why it's going to be unique to this generation in the same ways that, like, obviously it's not the same thing in any way, shape, or form, but I think there's similarities in, like, the way that the 70s there was the gas crisis, right? And it was something that affected everybody, and you couldn't live your life in the way that maybe had been built up or presented previously, because you had to acclimate to the world that was around you. And I think that's pretty standard. You have to acclimate no matter what. If there's a trauma or a tragedy, you have to make the choice of whether you're going to move forward or not. And it's always easier said than done. But I think your mention of the imprint that's going to be unique to this generation, and my daughter isn't going to have to really deal with that. She's going to have her own thing that she's going to have to deal with. And that might be another pandemic. It might be an attack. It might be something not as dramatic, but it might be something that really makes a lasting impact on her. And I think that will be, that's going to be her battle, you know?
I remember one of the early jokes and memes that came out from like early pandemic where it's like, why is grandpa using hand sanitizer? Oh, he was in that pandemic of 2020, you know, that kind of thing. Certain habitual things I think will stick with us. Like I didn't really use a whole lot of hand sanitizer, but now I do.
Yeah.
And even just like, I don't want to get into this too much, but like, I don't know, like I listened back to some of my early pandemic podcasts where I talk about like, you know, the emphasis on hand washing and things like that. And, you know, where that was really like a point of emphasis. And it almost feels kind of quaint going back and revisiting stuff that's even, you know, just over a year old. But I remember also saying, like, and I don't know how this became existential pandemic cast, but here we are. But no, seriously, it was like, I remember saying, like, wouldn't it be interesting if in all of our preventative measures for preventing COVID, we inadvertently prevent cold and flu? And sure enough, that kind of happened, because I don't know if anybody knew this or not, but people are gross.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very long way of saying, like, just because we started washing our hands and using hand sanitizer, I think we're actually kind of safer as a society and a people. So if people catch me using hand sanitizer 30 years from now and you want to call me out for it, it's like, yeah, man, but I don't got none of that flu. So
to anybody listening, just still wash your hands. It's still important. Don't let Mike tell you any differently, like it's quaint. Because it's not quaint. It is very important.
Well, I didn't mean quaint by unimportant. Yeah. It was just like, it was just... anyway, so...
I was just going to say, I think it's a really good lead-in. What we're talking about sets the stage for this whole, you know, if we're going to jump into the music aspect and the Seattle scene and everything, you can't have that conversation without having the COVID conversation. You can't have that conversation without having the conversation about the impact of this last year and a half and what it's done to us personally, as a Seattle scene, as a culture in the state, as a culture in the country, and globally. So, you know, not that my music is global, but...
Well, and I was going to say, you specifically and personally as an artist.
Right. That's really what it comes down to, is like, I would not have made this album had it not been for the space that I was given to be able to do so. Running myself ragged, being in a band, you know, doing the whole indie band thing with Waking Things, you just push so hard all the time. And not everybody's like this, but I know tons of people that are like this, which is that you know, that paper we were mentioning earlier. When I sent it off to a few people and they responded, they're like, oh my God, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's really what solidified it for me, is that I know that my experience is not unique, but I also know that my perspective is my perspective, and that I think there are some people that are willing to hear what I have to say, whether it's musically or otherwise, and none of that would be possible had it not been for that, like, breakdown moment. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? Yeah,
exactly. And not to, you know, make this a circle jerk suck off fest, but fine. But in our conversations, I've always been enamored with your depth of thought. And I've always been impressed with your work ethic. And I would say that I would, and I mean this affectionately, I would classify you as like a high functioning musician and independent artist. Like you're always like at that, you know, what's next? Where am I going? What's, you know, not content to sit still, always on the hustle.
Yeah, that's like a positive and negative thing for me. That I exist in this headspace where no matter what I'm currently doing, I still have at least like 4 or 5 other things that I want to be working on.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's music. Sometimes it's, drumming up an idea about like how can I incorporate something else into the music, whether it's like, can I use this little melody toward, put it toward a movie, or can I take something from a movie and incorporate it into some type of song that I'm working on? Or more importantly, stepping away from all of that and saying, how can I let my life re-influence my music again? All of this, hustle that I do all the time it's draining.
Yeah.
So I had to slow down a little bit and allow myself to just be a little more open with who I am, as opposed to narrowing my scope of like, okay, it's got to fit within the realm of waking things, and it's got to fit within like, even if we're doing a new album and it's like that's a new thing, but I hadn't written a pop song ever, and I hadn't written a song where I just played the bass and did like an electronica thing. I've never written anything like that.
Right.
And it's not it's not like crazy, oh my God, this is the next wave or new, unique thing, but it is for me. And that evolution of going from like, oh yeah, I know band stuff and I know band life, and now I want to learn more producer stuff, and I want to learn more about how I can craft a better song, as opposed to just thinking like, wow, I think I write good songs, So hopefully that's what this album does for me. At least I think it already has, but I hope that other people hear that when they listen to it.
Being a fan and supporter of Waking Things, I guess the first thing I would say in describing your current music and the stuff that you're putting out on Critter is that it is very unique. It's very different.
Unique and different are words that people use when they don't know how to describe that it's terrible.
I don't think it's terrible, but I do think that it's, you've got all kinds of cool experimental sounds and stuff like there's like, I was even listening on my walk this morning, and like there was a couple times like I got a good rhythm, and then I just stopped and kind of pushed my earbuds in. I'm like, the fuck is this? Okay, and then I just kind of keep going. It's so I thought maybe you kind of alluded to it a bit, but let's talk about kind of perhaps the transition from more, I don't even want to use the word traditional, kind of like alternative stuff that you were doing with Waking Things, to now stuff that's really alternative with what you're doing with Critter.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Is there a specific song that jumped out at you that because right now I've got I think I've got 14 of the 18 songs that are going to be on the album, and I should also say there's going to be, I think, a couple of bonus tracks too if you do it on Bandcamp. But the actual full album, I think, will have 17, and then 18 and 19 and 20 or whatever are probably going to be bonus tracks. So
cool.
Out of the songs that are out, out of the 14 songs that are currently out, is there one specifically that jumps out at you as something that made you kind of like, what the fuck is that,
I turned on Robot Window because
yeah.
because I'm into robots, and I think that was the one this morning where I was like, I don't know what this is.
Lost on me, but if I got it in
Yeah, I mean, it's a song that is literally 1 minute and 2 seconds long.
Yeah.
And it was inspired by the band Foxy Shazam, which, if you're not familiar with Foxy Shazam, you should go look them up. They have they got a pretty good back catalog where they started out as kind of like this weird theatrical like punk band, like kind of where, you know, the lead singer is like lighting like 5 cigarettes at a time and then eats them on stage and like does like,
oh my God,
he'll like run up behind his guitar player and jump on his shoulders as he's like playing a solo. Just really crazy, over the top stuff. And then they kind of went into more like 80s-ish, like Meatloaf, big arena, like anthem rock, and then they went into like a really subdued thing on an album. Anyways, they got a whole back catalog. So this song, Robot Window, I was driving along on Capitol Hill, and there's this really great little hardware store on 12th Avenue. I think it's called Pacific Hardware. Shout out. There's my business plug. Sponsor me. And they've got in their window, their window display is a couple of like, I think it's 3 different like robots in the window.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was about that moment, but sometimes when you're writing songs, or when you were just a here's my air quotes, songwriter, a melody will just pop up in your head, and it was that melody from that song that just stuck with me. And I went home and I tried to write something from it, and what ended up happening was I wrote that one opening verse and then the one chorus, and then I sat on it forever. And I didn't really think that I wanted to douse it down with just unnecessary like lyricism, where I said, hey, this is enough. I've heard artists do differently, and I've heard artists do the same. So I like this. I don't think it needs to go beyond this. Yeah. And it's a punk song. It's like got that big like belted opening that lasts for like 10 seconds, and then it just goes into a really simple kind of like pop punk song. Yeah. And I think if you were to boil down what's bouncing around in my head, or at least through my mid-20s, it would be that. It's just like theatrical and nonsense. And sure, but it kind of boils down to like a real, like maybe it's got a little bit of a catch to it, where I know that you're probably, it may not be your favorite song ever, but you're probably at some point you're going to be like, you might get that, you can get this thing stuck in your head, and that's fine by me. It doesn't. I'm not claiming to be, like some great Swedish, producer, like what's his name, Max Miller. I'm not writing Katy Perry's songs. I wish I were. If I was that good of a songwriter, then maybe I'd be getting paid for it. But this is what is in my head, and songs like that often they just pop up, and I'm like, I got to do it. Just got to do it. Well,
and that's what a lot of these feel like, is stuff where it was almost like you got struck by lightning, and you're just like, I've got to get this out. Yeah, and it feels like it has that urgency to it, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and any songwriter will tell you that they have those moments. They'll just, like, for me, one of the big things is walking. If I'm walking anywhere, it's like something about whatever I'm walking on. If I'm walking on gravel versus grass versus if I'm walking alone by myself or walking with somebody else, a melody will pop up in my head, and then I'll bust out my phone and I'll do the little voice memo thing. And I've got a bunch of voice memos where it's really embarrassing when I'm like trying to show somebody, and I'm just like, oh, hey, listen to this one thing. Oh, no, not that one, because it's just me going, don't worry, that's going to be a song eventually. And then, here we are. And that's kind of what happened with that.
That's interesting. So I listened to You Gotta Get Your Shit Together. I haven't heard Pockets yet.
Okay.
I gotta get on that. But that's a right banger.
You like that one, huh?
I do.
See? And that's the more traditional rock song, because I knew you were going to like that one.
Yeah.
It's definitely, those two songs are the more straightforward, like, these definitely could have been Waking Things songs.
Yeah. And maybe that's why it resonated with me, because it was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, it's the stuff that I'm more accustomed to, the stuff I'm used to.
It's familiarity.
You feel foolish with condescending words that you'd recite to remind a tiny part of you must have known this was all an apology that was meant to go through your back into the side. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel empty by baring crooked teeth and showing my defensive side. But since you took the chance to take me out at the knees, love served its only purpose as a complicated lie.
So Pockets was a that one inspired by the band Manchester Orchestra. They are this amazing rock band from the South, and they kind of they did the soundtrack for Swiss Army Man with Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. They did they've been hustling and working for years, and they've got side projects and all this stuff, but I went through a really big phase where Manchester Orchestra was my, like, everything. Mm-hmm. And that, if you remember the song Pretend from Waking Things, it's like that same vein of kind of like emotive, rock music.
Yeah.
And I think if I could have gotten him, I sent an email to their manager and I said, this is me, like, shooting for the stars, knowing it's not going to happen. But I was like, hey, I know that you guys are like a really big band and really busy, but like I would really like if Andy could sing on this song. What do you think? And I sent him the demo, and like, of course, no, it's never going to happen. But if you don't try, you'll never know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like Wayne Gretzky always says, you miss all the shots you never take.
That's right. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest.
So, and that's the other thing too, and maybe we can talk about this as we touch on each of these songs. One of the things that I like about the ramp up to the release of Critter is that you've set up this whole world, for lack of a better term, the Critter Bar, and you use it as a platform to highlight the incredible collaborators that you've been working with. So I want to make sure as we're chatting about the songs, it's like definitely give those shout outs to name your conspirators, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
is there some cool folks you were working with?
I'm trying to limit the amount of time I talk about myself, because the real reality is that this album and these songs are only great, in my opinion. They were fine by myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to fish for compliments or anything. I think personally I've gotten to that point where I say, hey, I can accept that when I think my song is like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
But they became, all of the ones with these collaborators, they became great because of them. Without a doubt, this album would not have taken place, mm-hmm. or would not have been, I don't know if I even released it if it had not been for every single person that was so kind enough to lend their talents mm-hmm. to the rest of the album. And it kind of got me in that headspace of, if I'm going to, keep doing music, this might be the direction I go, where I say, maybe I don't need to be the singer. Maybe I don't need to be the front person, and I can step back and if I write a song, does it fit somebody else better. And that's what I've learned on this album.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See, and I would also add to that, especially at a time, we briefly touched on existential dread, and collaboration in its own way creates accountability. To yourself, to others. And it's like, because there were times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this podcasting stuff. But then, like, I would have a buddy of mine ring me up and say, hey, man, you want to get together and talk about, this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
And that would reinvigorate me, whereas just ponying up to the mic by myself was sometimes a challenge. So I can appreciate it, at least spiritually, some of that creative juice that comes from working with exciting new folks, or folks you have worked with in the past as well.
Yeah, it's all music and entertainment, and all of this is far more collaborative than people want to believe. That you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and I feel very, very fortunate that the number of people that helped me out and jumped on the album did so, and when they did, they just delivered in spades. It was some of it was, hey, can you do this specific thing that I have in mind? Because I really think your voice would lend itself to it. Others was like, you know what, just do what you do. And those honestly was really those songs were honestly the more impactful ones for me, as opposed to like, oh, hey, I really like your voice, come sing this part that I already have pre-written, and it's great, it's good, it turned out awesome. But then there's like a handful of songs on the album that I'm like just so in love with, because it says more about who they are versus who I am, and that really elevates the song.
So let's talk about Jim Latch.
Oh, I'm gonna repronounce that for you.
Oh, please.
Yeah. So it's.
I tried.
No,
I tried. I even practiced.
That's okay.
In front of a mirror, but yes, please. At least I didn't say Glimlag.
Well, that's.
I almost did.
It's a little bit closer, actually.
God damn it! God damn it!
No. It is. It's an Afrikaans word.
Yes.
So in Afrikaans, it's pronounced Klemlach. So it's CLIM-LACH.
Okay.
Klemlach.
Klemlach.
Yeah, a little bit in there. And
right.
it's
I'll keep practicing.
It is the Afrikaans word for smile. My good friend who is on the cover for this album, you can see her and I are playing a little guitar in our little music room there. And that's my good friend Lisa Reed. And she is from South Africa.
Okay.
Moved to Seattle a couple of years ago. And she randomly came out to a Waking Things show in Bellingham. And then when she's just like, oh yeah, just, checking stuff out. And then, oh, wow, you live on Capitol Hill. And then immediately after that, it just went from like, oh, cool, it's nice to meet you. And then we've pretty much been inseparable friends since then. Now she is like a go-to best friend. So
that's awesome.
It's kind of nice. So I wrote this song for her birthday, and I thought that it was, out of all the songs, this is the whole idea of what the album is about, which is choosing happiness, choosing to move forward in whatever it is that you're doing and being present in that happiness, allowing yourself to make those changes and not being afraid of, moving toward that. And I think the problem that I used to have is that I would say, I don't want that. I don't want this specific thing in a specific way because it doesn't align with this idea of whatever I have, this path.
Yeah.
And once I just allowed myself to be happy, which is like I said, I want to be with my wife, and I'm not going to allow outside influence or, weird anxieties to prevent me from enjoying that. And it's just, she's like the greatest person ever. And then and then all of a sudden I'm going to be a dad, and I'm like really excited about it. So that's what this song really was about.
A reason to smile.
You see, and I wanted to touch on this one early on because this feels like the mission statement. Okay. As you said, it just kind of like feels like at its core what the meat of Critter is, and really kind of where Chris Sicard is kind of as in his artist journey, if I may.
Yeah, and I definitely I pulled a little bit of influence there from these last year or 2 years ago, there was a really big resurgence in beach house style music. Mac DeMarco, he's been making music for the last 10 years or whatever, really popular, building his popularity. And I really love this really kind of chill vibe tones that there's mine's not quite that, or this song is not quite like that. Or it's not exactly like that, but there's some influence there that I pulled that was a little more vibey, and that's what clean guitars, a nice good driving bass line, and a nice steady shuffle drum beat. I think it's a really chill song, and
very chill.
I like it.
I've got AM Thoughts next on my list.
Yeah, this this is another one of those situations, kind of like Robot Window, where I woke up and I had a melody in my head. And that happens all the time. Sometimes it really turns into something, but I had the time and the space to turn it into something. I was in quarantine. I wasn't even working. So I was woke up, had this thought in my head. It just kept circling around. It was the bass line, and I took a shower. I'm repeating it over and over, and it just kind of kept coming to me. And then I made sure, I'm hey, I know that you probably want to have breakfast, you want to make coffee, but just give me 20 minutes and I'll sit down and I'll hammer this thing out. And that's what happened. And then I started building the song and fleshing it out from there. This song is it's a love song, but it's a sad love song.
Yeah, there is a melancholy to it.
Yeah, and some of the greatest songs have melancholy, so I will never apologize for writing sad songs. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say that's kind of on brand for what you've brought to the table. You know, it's I've sometimes compared Waking Things to pop punk by way of musical theater, because
don't tell my wife that. What? Do you think I'm not going to sing?
Well, and there's a theatricality, and I think with the theatricality comes the melancholy as well. I think those kind of exist in hand.
Yeah, you're telling a story through a song, and I grew up watching. This is where my wife is going to make fun of me. I grew up watching Moulin Rouge, and I grew up watching Nightmare Before Christmas, and those songs they're very emotive, and it's very serious, but also very romantic, and Danny Elfman, and listening to Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman sing, and all this different stuff. It was just kind of brought this part of me out that was, hey, I want to be a performer in front of people, but I also am very sad, and I have so much to talk about. So here we are on an hour-long podcast.
Oh my gosh.
No mail today.
Nobody likes you. Let's show Mike some love. Write into the mailbag at mikeseibertradio@gmail.com. And of course, the spelling on that is SEIBERT.
You've got mail.
Everybody loves you.
I'm pretty sure the first song I heard was Hello.
Oh, okay. That one's not the oldest one.
No. It's like you had posted a few, and then I just kind of like jumped in.
Yeah. Really touch real quickly on Hello. Hello was a song that I was inspired by Elliot Sumner, who is the daughter of Sting, and she does this song called After Dark, and my friend from Portland showed it to me one time, and then years later I was like, man, that bass line is just so good. And then I tried to write my own version of something like that was like up in my head, and then it turned into kind of a pop punk emo song. And so who else in the Seattle music scene was like pop punk emo and could deliver? So I called on my boys from The Requisite,
yes,
and they killed it. They went from one of those songs where I was like, oh, hey, you know what, great, I'm glad I wrote it because I've been sitting on it for a long time. But then I was like, dude, this song, it kills. So the other songs that I want to talk about, the three, and the four, if I can squeeze it in.
Of course.
Southbound Letters. I just want to give a really big shout out to that song. That song to me was like, it's like Pixies, Cars, and a little bit of it's like 80s and 90s. So I don't know. There's like a mixture in there, but the person who really just blew me out of the water, Clarice Johnson. I met her because her group Snacks, SNACCS, I think they're defunct now, but she just blew me away. If you can listen to this girl's voice, she is incredible. I know she's finishing up school, and she's just an incredibly talented performer, and I cannot thank her enough for being on this song. So that one's one of my favorites. Climb.
Yeah.
So this is my Beatles / Panic at the Disco Pretty Odd song. It's got trumpet, which is kind of a Britpop thing for a little, I guess, drawn from a little bit there. But this was my, I wanted to get weird with the lyrics and talk and get obscure and metaphorical. But then the real kicker was I worked on this song for a really long time because I could not find a little kid who I could get the parents to commit to getting them to sing this part. Yeah. And it just took so long, and it's a lot harder to get, obviously you can't just be a stranger and say, hey, do you want, kids sing on the album, unless you're, going to like a freelance artist or something. But thankfully I have friends who were able to help me out and pull through, and Avery Lehman, who is the young girl who is the vocalist on that song, and then Nick from Tiger Rider is the vocalist at the beginning. That just it's one of my favorite songs. It's so happy, and it's the perfect way to end the album. Youth and Sex. I'm mentioning this one because I'm doing a music video for it next month.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, partnering with Roll Around Seatown. I don't know if I should say that officially, but officially, unofficially, Tiffany from Roll Around Seatown. It's this skate group, roller skate group, who meets at the Southgate Roller Rink and Judkins Park in South Seattle. So if you are a roller skate fanatic or you want to get into it, definitely hit up Roll Around Seatown. They're helping me do auditions and really put this whole thing together. So I'm incredibly excited to shoot a music video for that next month, featuring Belmez Faces, who also just put out an album, my good friend Royce. This is The Dark Timeline. Check it out on Spotify. It's a great album, 80s dark wave goth stuff, so it really fits in well with that song.
Oh, sweet. I gotta check that out. That sounds dope.
Very last song that I'll pitch because we could go on forever. It's not released yet, but boy howdy, the song "Get in Line" featuring Seattle's very own Danny Denial. He's just been this huge force to reckon with in the last couple of years, and I don't think that people give him the recognition that he deserves. Even though I see him as like one of Seattle's top artists, I still think a lot of people are sleeping on him, and they shouldn't be, because he tells stories in ways that a lot of other artists are afraid to, and he's doing it through not just music, because he's not just a single type of artist. He did a whole web series called Bazooka recently. It was political, it was DIY, it was fun, but it was also serious, but it was also sci-fi, and he had a bunch of awesome people in the Seattle scene on it. So definitely check that out too. And that one's coming out in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Get in Line featuring Danny Denial.
Very cool. And so with that, you've mentioned that you've been putting these songs out once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
To, man, I can't do the math. When did you start putting these out?
April 1st was when.
That's right.
It was 2 songs every 2 weeks, and I've thankfully been able to stick to that commitment.
Very cool. Yeah. And again, with the culmination of the completed album being on
the day my daughter is gonna be here in the world. Yeah, when my daughter is born, that's the same day as the album release. Obviously, I will have more important things to tend to, so I won't be watching to post anything. It's just going to be out there, and I'm going to be a dad, so I'll be focusing on that.
That's awesome. So before we pivot and move on, do you want to let folks know where they can listen to the album? I mean, we shouted out Spotify, but you had also mentioned Bandcamp, and more or less, where can folks get it? Where can folks connect, and all that other kind of cool, like, hey, check out my stuff type of promo stuff. That's why we're here.
Well, Mike, let me tell you where you can download Critter. All popular streaming services. No, I'm not going to do that voice anymore.
I was just sitting here patiently like, how far is he going to take this?
Oh, I can take it very far. You can listen to it on all the popular streaming services. It's on Tidal, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music. Bandcamp is where you're going to be able to get all of the bonus tracks. So if you're interested at all in the extra stuff, if 17 songs wasn't enough for you, well, guess what? You're in for some good news, because there's more.
That's awesome. Any plans on doing a physical version, or is it all just digital for now?
Right now, just digital, but I think once, physical is like, it's such a difficult thing to decide whether or not you want to spend the money on, if I'm not out promoting this, playing shows, and this was just like an online project for me, then it's like, do I need to spend $500 on CDs or vinyl or whatever?
Right.
It would be nice to have, just as a keepsake, something I could, pass on or let my daughter see eventually, or get a couple, 10 copies out to choice friends and family who refuse to join us in the 21st century with, streaming services or whatever.
Sure.
But that being said, there's no plans right now.
Well, and it's interesting, though, that in this, I mean, again, we've waxed philosophic about the year that was and how models have changed and how attitudes have changed. This project is something that was born of 2020, and it makes sense. And again, I'm getting way too philosophical about why there isn't a physical version of this. It makes sense organically because of the nature of the project that it exists in this digital space.
Yeah. And that's why I really like the cover for the album. I've been teasing it out, and you'll see it when it gets posted online when the album comes out. But it's a recreation of a dive bar, and with all these different artists in the dive bar, and it's it kind of makes you, at least that's what I was going for, is it reminded me of that feeling of being in a space with people in a time when that wasn't a thing.
Right. Yeah.
And a year and a half is a long time to not be around people. So.
Yeah, I mean, because even this, we were discussing this earlier. I honestly can't recall the last time I was across the table from somebody just talking openly, and I'm sure folks listening can pick up that the energy is different. I've been Zooming like everyone else. I've been doing video conferencing and phone calls and Skype, and finding these new ways to connect that I didn't really mess around with before. And it's different and it's interesting, and it reminds me of the stuff that you're doing. It's, it's new, it's different, it's interesting, and a little weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a couple more songs that definitely, let's see, the ones that are coming. I think there's one in particular that's a little bit more weird. But yeah, you do what you do, and we embrace what we can. And I appreciate you bringing me on here, and we can talk about this ad nauseum.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Chris Sicard, it is always a pleasure hanging out. It's been far too long. I appreciate you taking the time. Before we part ways for now, do you want to do one more pitch and plug for your solo project for Critter, and maybe let folks know where we can connect with you on the internets and the social medias and all that cool fun stuff, or anything else you want to plug while I got you here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just like to say that Critter is coming out on August 6th, and it will be available on Spotify and all the streaming services and everything, but I think I've been using Spotify the most. But yeah, August 6th, Critter by Chris Sicard. That's the album that you can find in all those places.
Thanks, Chris. And again, there are several tracks available for you to listen to right now in full, so go check that out. And I would love to hear what you think of Chris's new stuff. Is it quote-unquote, air quotes, unique and interesting, like I just said, or can you describe the indescribable Chris Sicard better than I can? Hit me up. I'd love to hear from you. Now, coming up later this week, it's part 2 of my conversation with Chris Sicard, and we're going to talk more about the Seattle indie music scene, and he's going to share a sample of an ethnographic paper he wrote on that very topic for an anthropology course. Now, what's an ethnographic paper? You're going to have to find out in our next podcast, but I promise you it has the combination of acerbic wit, depth of thought, and warm humor I've grown to appreciate from Chris Sicard over the years. But that will wrap things up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to listen to all my past shows, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever the heck else you listen to your podcasts. And you can check out the full show archive out on SoundCloud. 5 years and over 300 episodes worth of shows out there. And join us for the Mike Seibert Radio podcast live stream out on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. For my guest, Chris Sicard, my name is Mike. This has been Mike Seibert Radio. And until next time, support your local scene and make good choices.
You've been listening to the Mike Seibert Radio Podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching at Mike Seibert Radio. Email us at mikeseibertradio@gmail.com. The spelling on that, of course, is SEIBERT. Call into the voicemail hotline at 231-224-MIKE. Once again, that's 231-224-6453. Special thanks to Michael Geisler for our theme music. For more like it, check out bydoormusic.com. This has been a Mike Seibert Radio production.